introduce myself. My name is Rennie, and this is Miss Cherie. We have Legs the cat, and we have Diesel the dog. And I want to thank you for having us here today because you're letting us speak to something that's near and dear to our heart, and that's animal welfare and the humane treatment of animals. So to get started, I have a book, and I really like this book. And I want to read the book first, and then you're going to understand why I brought a three-legged dog. And we're going to talk about the responsibilities of having pets, okay? And how to treat pets kindly. And when we talk about treating pets kindly, we're not just talking about your own animals at home, like your house pets. We're talking about the wildlife that lives in your backyard. We're talking about livestock. We're talking about all the little living creatures, because we need to treat everything with compassion and care, okay? So this book is called The Big Little Book of Happy Sadness. And this book really reminds me of what it's like some days at the shelter. So George lived alone with his grandmother and an empty house where his mother and father should have been. George's grandmother was a kind lady, but she was very old, and the two of them spent most of their time on different planets. Most Friday afternoons, on his way home from school, in that time of the weekend when lonely people realize just how lonely they are, George would visit the animal shelter, and he always seemed to end up at the last cage in the last aisle. Even the concrete there was broken. Hidden in the shade of a huge tree where the sun never bothered to go, the concrete in the cages were covered with a coat of green. The very last cage was where the dogs that no one wanted went for the final week before their journey to heaven. George felt at home there. In the dark gloom, he found a place where everything seemed lonelier than he was. The last cage was often empty, and any dog that did find itself in there usually hid in the shadows, unseen, unloved, until one special Friday, George arrived and he found a dog sitting at the front of the cage looking at him. George stared at the dog, and the dog stared at George, and they both knew they were seeing a reflection of themselves. The dog, like George, was a little scruffy and very sad. Yet at the end of the line, he accepted his fate, quietly dignified, and ready to just accept. Here was the dog that George could really identify with. George went to the office. He goes, "The last dog." Lady goes, "Last dog?" He goes, "Yes, the one at the end." "Oh, that poor thing, today's his final day. Can I take him?" "Are we talking about the same dog?" the lady said. "That three-legged one in the last cage?" George nodded. "Well, why on earth would you want him? We've got 87 other dogs here. They've all got 4 legs and bright eyes and a coat that doesn't look like it's covered in lard. Why not take one of them?" "No, I want the last dog," said George. "Well, he's called Jeremy," said the woman, "and you're going to have to ask your parents first. We close in 1 hour. So George had 1 hour or that puppy was going to get put to sleep. George ran faster than he had ever ran before. So fast, all the air and words were sucked right out of him. "Dog, dog!" Jeremy was all he could manage. Slow down," said George's grandmother. "No time! Dog!" said George. "We'll have to think about this," said the old lady. "It's a big decision. You know what they say, a dog isn't just for Christmas, it's for life." "But he won't have a life tomorrow," said George, and finally managed to tell her about Jeremy. His grandmother saw the big empty place inside of George, and she got her coat. She said, "You go ahead, and I'll catch up." Grandma knew that George needed something more in his life. George ran back and caught the office lady who was getting ready to leave, and they waited for grandmother together. In his cage, Jeremy waited too. See, Jeremy doesn't know he's going to get a home. Jeremy curled up in his basket, and he watched the sky grow dark, and he closed his eyes. And then his cage opened for the last time. Jeremy was like, "It's not morning yet. I didn't even have a last dream." But there was that little round boy who had looked at him before, and an old lady. They were both smiling at him, and they didn't take him towards the green door that led to the big kennel in the sky. They turned left and went back to the office. The dog shelter lady gave Jeremy a bright blue collar, a leash, and an ID tag with his name on it. They were the first ones he had ever owned because no one ever wanted to take him for a walk before. People don't want to take a three-legged dog for a walk because sometimes they hobble and they fall. After it had taken just 5 minutes to reach the shelter gate, George picked up Jeremy and he carried him home. Jeremy had never been inside a house before. When George lifted him into the armchair in front of the fire, Jeremy thought, wow, maybe I did go through that green door up to doggy heaven. In the next few weeks, Jeremy also learned new words. Words like cushion and dinner and cuddle. And George's world was filled with words he had heard but never experienced, like warm and not being alone. The one word they both wanted to add was walkies, but they needed one more leg for that. So George and his grandmother decided to do something about it. They would make Jeremy a leg. Neither of them were very good at making things, so they started modestly. They mixed up a flour and paste and built a leg out of newspaper. And that just goes to show how much they loved Jeremy. They wanted to try and make him whole. That's one of the faults of nature, is that dogs can't smile, because when Jeremy ran around the garden on his new leg, he had a grin inside his head as big as Australia. He ran over to a tree, and for the first time in his life, he lifted his leg. Now, of course, he could have lifted his leg, because only having 3 legs, you don't have to lift that 4th one, it's always lifted, but he didn't know that. He would do it wrong, and he would fall down, and he'd get a wet tummy, but not anymore. But that new leg got wet, and it collapsed. So then George's grandmother decided to bake him a leg, but he ate the leg that she baked him, so that didn't work very well. Finally, George sharpened his knife and carved Jeremy a wooden leg like pirates wear. And then he made a 2nd leg with a wheel on the bottom so they could play soccer, and a 3rd leg with a slipper for bedtime. The empty place inside George didn't seem so empty anymore, and the 3 of them lived happily ever after for a very long time. So now I'm going to tell you about Diesel, okay? So I volunteered at the shelter, as does Miss Cherie. And I was going through the shelter, and I was in the very last row, in the 2nd to last cage. Now, the last row at the shelter sometimes have dogs that aren't going to be able to go out the front gate. They're going to be put to sleep, and they will essentially be going through the green door to doggy heaven. And Diesel was there. And I went in to take his picture because I thought, wow, he's really cute. Maybe we can get someone to adopt him. And I walked in there, and his leg was lifted like this, and it was covered in blood, and you could see through the bones, and he had a big cut here. So I picked up Diesel, and I took him into the office, and I said, look at this poor dog. Can we take him to the vet? And the shelter director said yes. The vet said Diesel could only live if they took off one of his legs. And so they did the surgery. Now, unlike the dog in the book, Jeremy, you can see Diesel can walk on his 3 legs. And I think that's something that everybody needs to remember. When you go and you're looking for an animal, or you're looking at other people, you don't have to be perfect to be perfect, because in my mind, he's perfect. I think any of you that have had a chance to pet him and feel him and talk to him, he's perfect, right? Yes. So it's what's inside. And now I want to find out, by a show of hands, how many of you have pets? Okay.
You
how
know
many?
I have pets.
Yeah, I know she has pets. How many of you have an ID tag on your pet?
You know I have one too.
Okay. One thing that is very, very important, I want everybody to remember, okay? Having an ID on your pet will make sure if your dog ever runs out that door, or your cat, and they get away, that we know where to take them back. Because at the shelter, all the time, animals are brought in. And sometimes they have a collar on, but there's no ID tag. And so we don't know how to get a hold of the owners. And if the owners don't know about the shelter, the dog never finds its family again. Really important. Uh-huh. Well, if you guys ever get a chance to go visit the shelter, and I think we're talking about doing a field trip, maybe we can make everybody an ID tag for their pet, okay? As long as you promise to put that ID tag on your pet. So, Well, that's good that you gave him a new home. So there's really important things. We're going to talk in a little bit, okay? There's some really important things you have to remember when you have a pet, okay? Having a pet is like your mom and dad have children. Now, when they get home from work, they don't go, I'm tired and I'm not making you dinner, right? They feed you whether they're tired or not. You are a responsibility that they love, and they're going to take very good care of you. Well, a pet is like that. You might get home from school and you might think, I really want a snack. But your dog's like, hey, I need to go outside. I've been in this house all day long. And you're like, no, I need you to wait. I need a snack. You can't do that. That little creature depends on you for everything. So you always have to make sure you know what their needs are and you meet their needs, okay? So a dog, a cat, any kind of little creature always needs fresh water. Got to keep that water bowl clean, because did you know a dirty water bowl can grow parasites? And the parasites can give your dogs diarrhea. So who wants diarrhea, right? Nobody. So that water bowl needs to be cleaned out with soap and water. They need to be fed once or twice a day. Can't ever forget to feed your dog. Dogs need to go to the vet. Does anybody know why they need to go to the vet?
Oh.
Okay, you. Purple guy.
Jaden.
Because they might have an injury that they don't know about.
Well, a lot of why they have to go to the vet every year is called preventative medicine. And that's when they get their shots so they don't get sick, okay? That's when they check for worms, make sure that your dog doesn't have any worms. They give them booster shots, just like, children get booster shots. They have those. And it's just all about being healthy. Just like when you go to a doctor for your well check, right? Same difference. So you have to make sure your dog goes to the vet regularly. What else do you need to do with your dog? And I know you want to answer, so you can answer this one. So what else should you do with your dog? Yes. Yes, very good. She said you should walk it every day. Dogs need exercise. A dog who doesn't get any exercise is a dog who's going to get in trouble. So, and dogs need chew toys, because if you don't give them a chew toy, what are they going to chew? Maybe, maybe your favorite pair of shoes. Exactly.
My kids this big and too hot. I got this new dog named Fun. I don't mind. I can't. He wasn't very active. He got slept a lot. Oh, no, scoop in.
Yep, that'll do it. Did you hear what he said? They got a new puppy, and their puppy was not very active. It wasn't doing very much because it had a belly full of worms. So that's something else you have to do with pets. So I want to talk to you guys about something else, okay? Now, you said Gumbo, so I said Gumbo. Diesel, after he had his leg cut off, he had to go to a special home called a foster home. And the foster home took care of him while he had a cone on, and he had his stitches, and he was getting better. So do you know that anybody who has the desire to foster can go down to the shelter with your mom and dad, and you can talk to them about being a foster home. So a foster home, you have a dog come in when it's really cold. Let's say it's really, really cold, and the dogs at the shelter have no heat. You get to bring it home for a couple days, and you take care of it. Your parents have to fill out an application, and they have to be able to keep the puppy inside. You have to feed it. You have to take care of it just like you would your own dog. But we always need foster families, so that's something, you could talk to your mom and dad about.
My dog, her foster home was outside, so nobody really took care of her.
Oh. Yeah, it's good to keep your pets inside. It's very hot here in the summer. It's very cold, as we saw last week sometimes, and their little bodies just can't handle it. Think how you would feel laying on this cold concrete last week when that wind was blowing. It was so cold. That would not be very nice. Yes?